Paul.
I said, well, I've got this friend who's really good, you know. And they said, well, yeah, like what? You know, I said, well, he can play raunchy perfectly. Down, 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 down. And we all love that song. So we said, well, gotta try him out. Remember, we ended up on the top deck of a bus, empty, late night bus kind of thing, and just us there. And he said, go on, George, get your guitar out. Go on, you show him, man. I thought, yeah. And he got it out. Down, 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 sure enough. Note perfect, raunchy, you're in.
First thing we ever recorded was That'll Be the Day, a Buddy Holly song, and one of Paul's called In Spite of All the Danger. And somewhere, it might be around, it's in Liverpool, somewhere, that record. That's the actual first recording we ever made. And everybody hung around in this club in Liverpool called the Jacaranda, which was near the art school, near Paul and George's school, in the centre of Liverpool. And so we started hanging around there before we were really formed a band, you know, when there was just me, Paul and George.
We used to show up for gigs with just 3 guitars, and the person booking us would say, where's the drums then? And to cover this eventuality, we say, the rhythm's in the guitars.
We once tried to do this audition for Carol Levis. There was this guy, Carol Levis Discoveries, and the scam, what it was that, you know, everybody would go on an audition and then they'd pick out somebody out of the auditions. You say, okay, you, and they'd pick out about probably 20 different acts to go on. And they'd have an audience, and then they'd have the clapometer, and whoever won would go on into the final or come back next week. And it was just something that kept on going. We went in for one of those.
So we were going up on the train from Liverpool to Manchester, rehearsing what we were going to do. And only me and George had our guitars. I think John, he must have sold his or busted or something. He didn't have his with him.
Okay, there's just the two of us with the guitars, and as it happened, it looked good because Paul was like left-handed and I was right-handed, and still am. And John was in the middle, and like John stood there with a hand on each shoulder, you know, think it over what you just said.
Ba, ba, ba. Me and George. John would do the lead, and we were also going to do Rave On. So we went, we did it, he put his arms around us and stuff, and it was okay. We didn't win, as usual, but I believe that day some unfortunate person in that theatre was relieved of his guitar. Stuart was John's friend, mainly, from art college. Stuart was a very good painter. We were all slightly jealous of John's friendship. John being a little bit older, certainly than me, certainly than George. He was a little bit, you know, you wanted to sit next to him on a bus and stuff. Like, he's the older fella, you know, it's just the way it was. Now, when Stuart came in, it was a little bit, he was sort of taking a little bit of that position away from us. We sort of had to take a little bit of a back seat.
The famous stories where he sold his painting to John Moore exhibition or something like that.
So the question was, what do you do with 75 quid? So we said, you know, that happens to be exact amount it takes to buy a Hofner bass, and that'd be a great thing to spend the money on. I said, no, I'm a painter. I've got to spend on paints and such like, you know. We said, no, Stuart, really? And John and I kind of gave him quite a sort of persuasive argument that the best thing to do, obviously, was to buy this Hofner bass, which he did. He went and did that. And Only trouble was he couldn't play it.
But it was better to have a bass player who couldn't play than to not have a bass player at all.
Ringo was a professional drummer who sang and performed and had Ringo Starr time, and he was in one of the top groups in Liverpool before we even had a drummer.
Well, Rory and the Hurricanes, they were the first ones in Liverpool who really wanted to get into rock and roll. Because we were playing skiffle then, before that. And he had this rock and roll blonde hair attitude, and Johnny Guitar was just, like, for me, the Liverpool's Jimi Hendrix at the time. And the one really good story about Rory and the Hurricanes, which I was a member, we were playing the Cavern, and Johnny Guitar brought a radio with him, and he plugged his guitar into the radio so we could be a bit more rock and roll. And they threw us off for being rock and roll. He plugged in the radio. Get off!
John thought of the name Beatles, and he'll tell you about it now.
Well, I had a vision when I was 12, and I saw a man on a flaming pie, and he said, "You are Beatles with an A," and we are.
John put this thing in the Mersey Beat, right, which was also started by Bill Harry, who went to art college with John, just saying that this little guy appeared on a flaming pie, you know, in the sky, and said, "Let there be Beatles," with an A.
John got the name Beatles
In a vision,
ages ago, you know, when we needed a name and everybody was thinking of a name, and he thought of Beatles.
I was looking for a name like the Crickets that meant two things. And from Crickets, I got to Beatles. When you said it, people thought of Crawley things. And when you read it, it was beat music.
That's better, Johnny. You know, I missed you. Ever since the club split up, I missed you. We all missed you. Did you miss them? Yeah, sure. The Beatles missed you. All the Beatles missed you.
When we started off, we had a manager in Liverpool called Alan Williams, who was a small bloke, a little sort of high voice, little Welsh accent. Yeah, all right, lads. He was a great bloke, a real good motivator. He was very good for us at the time, you know. And he eventually got us an audition that was held at one of his clubs called the Blue Angel. And it was for Larry Parnes, who had a big stable, so-called, of rock stars down in London. And so this was like a big opening, you know, to get this audition. So we showed up there. Half the groups in Liverpool showed up there. I think all the groups in Liverpool showed up that day. And there were photos being taken as a record, you know, this is us at the audition, this is something for Larry to take a look at or whatever. And we always, unfortunately, had to ask Stuart to sort of turn a little bit away from the camera. We'll say to him, look, don't go, because he couldn't play that well. We might be in A and he might be in A flat. And we thought someone would spot this, because we always looked, see where people were on the guitars, see where they... So we'd ask him to sort of turn away a bit. And so there are a few photos with Stuart, you know, moodily with his back to the camera, you know. That was the reason there. We eventually got the audition. I think Larry picked up quite a few Liverpool groups at that audition. And our only disappointment was, though, all the people in his stable were like Marty Wilde. They all had kind of very furious names. Billy Fury, somebody Tempest, Storm, Hurricane. They were all tempestuous names, you know.
There's Ron Wycherley, 17, known to his fans as Billy Fury, guaranteed £1,000 in his first year. Roy Taylor, 18, alias Vince Eager, £5,000 by his 5th year.
And of course we thought, well, this would be great, you know. Well, we ended up with this bloke called Johnny Gentle. Some slight disappointment in the name department there.
John Askew, or Johnny Gentle, 22, from Merseyside. And Duffy Power, real name Raymond Howard, 17. All eager, power, gentle fury in the lucrative business, as someone said, of putting teenage growing pains to music. Do you rechristen all your boys?
Oh, yes, I think this is terribly important. Otherwise, they would go on the stage with peculiar names that wouldn't be part of their makeup.
They didn't really like the name, the Beatles. So they wanted to come up with something more imaginative. So they came up with Long John Silver and the Beatles, and we thought, nah. So it ended up Long John and the Silver Beatles. We became the Silver Beatles for a while, for this tour of Scotland. So we thought, well, you know, if the name is, the group's being changed, and he's Long John, I mean, people, we all decided to change our names anyway, and people thought, well, they did, but John didn't. John was cool, he didn't. Well, let me tell you, he was Long John for the period of that tour. He's quite happy to be Long John too. So I thought, well, if he's changing it, you know, maybe we all should, you know. So we all kind of fancied it, our first foray into professional entertainment. That's what you do, isn't it? You change your name. So I became Paul Ramon for some reason. I thought it was a very exotic French-sounding name.
And I was Carl Harrison. And it's funny, really. It doesn't sound like a stage name now. It's just that I loved Carl Perkins.
Stuart became Stuart de Stael, because he liked Nicholas de Stael, who's an abstract expressionist painter.
But anyway, it was a pretty pathetic tour. By the end of it, we were broke, we had no money, we were all cold and freezing and, you know, just miserable, and that was it. You know, we all came back to Liverpool and nothing happened, really. We didn't really know. I felt really sad because we were like orphans or something. We didn't have, our shoes were all full of holes and our trousers were a mess, and we didn't have uniforms, you know. And this guy, Larry Pond's fella, Johnny Gentle, you know, he did have this posh suit and stuff. And I remember trying to play Won't You Wear My Ring or something around your neck. That's what he was doing. One of these Elvis tunes, remember? And we were crummy. The band was horrible, you know. We were really an embarrassment. We didn't have amplifiers or anything.
So I would say to the others, when they were depressed, or we were all depressed, you know, and thinking that the group was going nowhere and this is a shitty deal and we're in a shitty dressing room, I'd say, where are we going, fellas? And they'd go, to the pop, Johnny, in pseudo-American voices. And I'd say, where's that, fellas? And they'd say, to the toppermost, the poppermost. I'd say, right. Then we'd all sort of cheer up.
This band called Derry and the Seniors, they got offered this job to go to London, give up your jobs and come to London, and you go in with Larry, right? And so they all gave up their jobs, and then they didn't get a gig. So they were like a bit pissed off at that. So I remember them saying, we're going to London, we'll get that Ponzi and beat him up. So Alan Williams, who was the club owner who did the audition, and it was sort of, you know, he was probably the first big groupie of Liverpool. He drove him to London and said, well, bring your instruments, lads. And, you know, you never know, he could get a gig. So he got him a gig in the Two Eyes in London. So they were playing there, and this fellow, Bruno Koschmider, from this club in Hamburg, right? I think it was him, and he saw them and booked them to go to Germany. And then later he sent a message saying, I want another band, because we were probably so cheap. Send us another band. So there's Alan Williams came to us and said, okay, lads, you can have this job in Germany. The only problem is you've got to be 5 people. He's asked for a 5-piece band. At that point, Paul was the drummer because all the drummers didn't show up. And so that's when I said, okay, I remember this guy who went up to this club and they were going to, Pete Best, and he had this drum kit for Christmas.
He was known on Merseyside as mean, moody, and magnificent. Pete Best.
And then we had all sorts of different drummers all the time, because people who owned drum kits were far and few between. It was an expensive item, and they were usually idiots, We'd got Pete Best just because we needed a drummer the next day to go to Hamburg.
He came down to the Jacaranda Club. We did a quick audition with him and jumped in the van and went to Hamburg.
We ended up in Hamburg at very late one night. We got the timing wrong. There was no one there to meet us, but we could find Hamburg off the map. But then trying to find St. Pauli, the little district, and Reeperbahn, everyone knew. Oh, Reeperbahn, ja, is this there? You go to Mr. Don't keep it to other house. Oh, okay. So we went down. We found the street and the club, but it was all closed. But we were there with no hotel or anything, and it was now bedtime, yeah. So we managed to shake up someone from a neighbouring club or something. They found the guy, and he opened the club, and we slept the first night in the alcoves on the little red leather seats.
Second night we moved in the Bambikino, and then we were there for ages, like 2 months, 3 months.
And I remember Rory Storm and his group coming with Ringo to see us. They arrived a bit later and came and saw the group in residency, came around to see how the groups were living, and they were really shocked because they remembered, like, one of us had a Union Jack over us to keep warm.
Rory and I, or the band, we were staying in one room in the German Siemens mission. Later on, they were sleeping for a while in the back of the club, and I'll never forget when we arrived and they said, yes, you know, now this is where you live. It was just like a couple of old settees and flags, Union Jacks, like they were your sheets, you know. I said, well, we don't this, we've got suits, we're leaving, blah, blah, blah. So that's when we went to this life of luxury in the German Siemens mission.
Everything else was such a buzz, you know, being right in the middle of the naughtiest city in the world at 17 years old. It was kind of exciting. And learning, you know, about, well, there's all the gangsters and there's the transvestites and there's the, you know, it was like that, there's the hookers.
At that time, we were just kids let off the leash, really, come straight from Liverpool to Hamburg. And we were used to these little Liverpool girls, but by the time you got to Hamburg, if you got a girlfriend there, she was likely to be a stripper. It was the only kind of people who were around at the time we were around late at night there. So, I mean, for someone who'd not really had much sex in their lives before, which none of us really had, to be suddenly involved with a sort of hardcore striptease artist who obviously knew a thing or two about sex was quite an eye-opener.
And that was also a point of our lives where we found Dexedrine uppers, pills. And that's the only way we could continue, was to be on, Preludin, they were called, and you could buy them over the counter, so we never thought we were doing anything, but you'd get really wired, and you'd go on for days. So with beer and Preludin, that's how we survived.
We used to just be up there frothing, at the mouth, just foaming, just stomping away, doing this, so... Those were the days. The best things in life.
In Hamburg, because we had to work 6 or 7 hours a night on stage with no rest, the waiters always had these pills called Preludin. And so the waiters, when they'd see the musicians falling over with tiredness or with drink, they'd give you the pill. You'd take the pill, you'd be talking, you'd sober up. You could work almost endlessly until the pill wore off, then you'd have to have another.
I think that's where we found our style. We developed our style because there's this fella there, he used to say, you've got to make a show for the people. And he used to come up every night shouting, Mac Show. So we used to Mac Show, and John used to dance around like a gorilla, and we'd all, knock our heads together and things like that.
By the time we all met up in Germany, they were playing one club, we were playing another. They were just great by then. And I used to because we used to do long hours. We used to do 12 hours at a weekend between two bands when we ended up on the same club. And so if they had the last set, I'd sort of be semi-drunk and demanding they play slow songs.
And he'd come to our club real late at night, and he used to like the sort of blues feel of the late night sessions when there was hardly anybody there, and we were getting down. I could see what he liked about it. We were playing stuff a bit more for ourselves by that time of night, particularly because there was no one in. And this was all sort of bluesy. This was like B-sides and lesser-known tracks. So a thing we used to do, that his particular favourite, he always used to request it, was 3:30 blues.
We made friends with a lot of people. There was... the ones who became our real friends were the ones who are known now as Klaus Bormann, Jürgen Vollmann, and Astrid, who took all the famous photographs of us at that period.
They liked all the rock and roll stuff, the quiffed back hairdos, all that kind of thing, the leather outfits, the shades. They weren't really rockers or mods like we'd seen. They were something in the middle. They called themselves exes, existentialists. They were art students, really.
best work was never recorded, you know. We were performers in Liverpool, Hamburg, and around the dance halls, you know, and what we generated was fantastic.
I was 17 and when we first went out there, and we went to the Indra Club and then got moved to the Kaiser Keller, and then that ended up with us getting the gig to go to the Top 10 Club. And right before that happened, I got busted for being underage. Now, they had this kind of situation in Germany, which I'd never come across before, which was a curfew. And after 10 o'clock at night, anybody who was under 18 had to get out. And I was only 17. I was sitting in the band and I started getting worried. And eventually somebody found out we didn't have any work permits or visas. So they started closing in on us, and the police came one day and then they just booted me out. And that was right at a critical time because we'd decided we'd been offered a job to go to this other club,
which was called the Top 10. That was the club we were ambitious to play at because it was a slightly better club. It was on the main Reeperbahn, the other's a Freiheit, which is off the main drag. So as we were leaving, me and Pete Best were packing up, and we were the last to leave. And he found a condom in his luggage. And what we did, just for a laugh, was outside in the corridor, concrete. There was nothing could have caught fire at all. We pinned it up on the wall, and for a boyish prank, we set fire to it. So it left a little sort of little black sort of rubber stain on the wall, and that was like, you know, right, we're going, hey, on to better things. But of course, the fellow wasn't pleased we were going to the new club anyway, because this was competition. We were taking all our business, all his business, to this new club. So he immediately rang up the police, and we were just sort of walking down the Reeperbahn store. Come with me. And we were put in jail for about 3 hours. First time in our lives, you know. Bloody hell, German jail.